Well, that's part of what it's got to have. First, you have to, they're trying to decide, the board's trying to decide whether or not we're allowed to.
Good evening. This is the Beach Advisory Committee meeting. And we do have a presentation tonight about healthy beaches. And we're going to move that up on the agenda because the presenter is traveling, I guess, from Portland, and it's night and it's not great weather, so we want to get the presentation and get her out of here as quickly as possible. We do have a quorum, and
it's a delay. In case you say anything, Richard, that's what that is.
yeah.
Oh, okay.
Can I have all of you read the minutes for August 13th?
Yes.
Can I have a motion?
I'll move the motions be accepted.
Second.
All in favor?
All right?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. We normally have a public session where anything that's not on the agenda, you can bring up whatever issue you want regarding the beach. We would ask you to go to the microphone and tell us your name and where you live, and please be succinct in your questions. Bill Loeffler.
Yeah.
I attended an excellent meeting this afternoon at the Southern Maine Agency on Aging, dealing with emergency situation preparations and the things one should have in the house and be prepared for whatever may come down the pike. And I thought it was something that the committee perhaps might like to give some more detailed attention to, since we never know what's coming in from the storms in the ocean. And even though the town has put rocks in front of the ways to the beach, we could have some sort of much worse situation, and it might be worthwhile at least for the committee to talk to these folks about preparedness and something that we might want to look into in greater detail as far as Goose Rocks is concerned. It was an excellent session. I was very impressed with the young man who presented it. Unfortunately, he only included Cumberland County, and I made mention that I thought we were being left out. But I just wanted to share that with you because I was so impressed.
Thanks, Bill. We did have a presentation a couple of summers ago by Alex Lacchiato, who was with the Coast Guard Auxiliary. Similar issue of preparedness for storms.
Well, I was thinking of a special meeting such as what we had today, rather than just a committee meeting.
Yeah, well, it was a summer meeting, so it was attended by a lot more folks than are here tonight. Anyone else? Carol?
My name is Carol Sherman. I live at 109 Kings Highway in Goose Rocks Beach. And this is a very quick summary, but I wanted to tell people that Kennebunkport Conservation Trust has purchased 48 acres of land, which was a Bryant property off Route 9, which will connect to 163 acres of their property. And they're going to build a park. And I am beyond excited for several reasons. It'll be something that will be part of our community. It'll be for us, for our kids. Now, disclaimer, it's all in visionary. Nothing has been written down, so this is all concepts of brainstorming. But it's going to be earth and wildlife friendly park. We call it the park for now. They'll have a master plan. It's going to be for the whole community, for people, for dogs. There'll be open space. cabin with a long porch and rocking chair, water feature. We hope to have a ranger on site. There'll be trails for hiking, for biking, for snowshoeing, and the Conservation Trust already has the equipment to groom the trails, so that could be done relatively quickly. There'll be 3 fenced-in areas within the park for dogs, which is, my love. And as of now, there'll be a large area for large dogs, small dogs, and then what we thought of, we'll have an area for dogs that don't get along with other dogs, that really don't belong in a dog park, and which I happen to have one, but so do many other people. But it would be so that dog could also exercise. And what we sort of visualize is that you do the honor system, and that you would sign up, and during that time you would have a area where you could exercise your dog or 2 dogs, and they would be away from other dogs. We'll have agility and obstacle course. It'll all be designed, it'll all be natural and rustic and Maine, no orange and brights. We'll do native trees and shrubs. We'll have pollinator pathways. We'll have security, lighting. And then my other favorite thing is if anybody's ever gone to Rachel Carson loop by in Wells, Route 9, they have that mile flat loop that you can walk around that has a half-mile cutoff. We do the same thing, which would be for seniors like me who can no longer do the trails, which I miss going in the woods terribly, and for people in wheelchairs, and for mothers with strollers, that they'll be able to get out there and get out in the woods and enjoy it. Maine woods are some of the most beautiful in the world. They're beautiful. So anyway, somebody wants to talk to me about it. Tom Bradbury's comment to me was, this is a fun, happy project. We still need people. You'll be impressed. We have a board, and we have a council, and we have Friends of the Park. And on our council, we have the former chairperson of the Humane Society of the United States. We have 4 local veterinarians, 1 doctor, 1 earth activist. We have the executive director, Animal Welfare Society, and their top dog trainer. So we're really starting off well, but as disclaimer, this is all visionary, so we don't know what's going to happen. But wanted people to know.
Carol, could you describe where the property is, please?
Tom Bradbury said to me, New Biddeford Road, if you go 55 miles an hour, if you come down Route 9, past New Biddeford Road, you count 8 seconds, 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, turn left, and there it is. And there's just a dirt path there. There's no sign, no nothing.
That was heading north, right?
Headed towards Biddeford.
Towards
It's on the Biddeford, Kennebunkport line. So part of our community will also be Fortune's Rocks, Biddeford Pool, Granite Point will all be, part of that area too. I'll answer any question.
I have 2.
If you
No,
know where
no,
the,
it's to the land
It's
side.
on,
Yeah.
away from the ocean.
it's the Wolf Lobster Pond.
Yes.
Just past.
Just
Same
past
side, just further towards Biddeford. Bob?
At the risk of testing our marriage, I'm just curious, the agility training, is that for people or dogs, Richard?
Dogs.
It's okay, so it's, no, I
But
just-
they do have some for, people on trails. I mean, they have agility on trails. So, I mean, they do both.
and the other reason you're telling us now is because you think this will help keep the dogs busy at places in and around Goose Rocks without having to try to get everybody to get on the beach with their dogs. Is that what part of this is about?
I think people should be allowed to go on the beach with their
No,
dogs.
no, I understand.
But, we're losing
It's an
our beach at high
alternative.
tide. We
Okay.
lose our beach at high tide. Kennebunk Beach loses their beach at high tide. This will be a place
It's an alternative.
that people will have.
Thank you.
And our goal is to make it that people want to go there as much as they'd like to go to the beach.
And it's all tide access.
Yes, all tide access, very nicely put, thank you very much. Yes, sir.
Carol, I think this is a wonderful idea. The property, the personnel you have lining up, and you envision that is great. I just have one question, and maybe Lori knows the answer. What does this reduce our tax collection for? What's the tax value of that property to the town?
I don't know, I wasn't prepared to discuss the value of the property.
I don't know.
Well, the
It's-
Conservation Trust has owned 163 acres for a long, long
No,
time.
the 48 acres.
Well, that I do not know the answer.
It'd be nice to know it.
I don't know, Jim, it is a preservation of open space. We had a Board of Selectmen a number of years ago with two members who were, all they could talk about was the Conservation Trust, how many acres of property were taken off the tax roll. And they wanted this volunteer organization to pay in lieu payments for land that is being conserved for us and for our future. For me personally, I don't care how much it's on the tax roll for. The benefit that we get from that, we could never buy with tax money.
Richard, I began my remarks with saying, I think it's a great idea. I think it's wonderful. It's very exciting. I really mean that. But I'd like to know what the value is that the town will not be collecting in taxes.
But
I'll
you
try
see,
and
made
find
up
that
somehow.
out. I think I can look that up in the
You know,
assessors.
and probably it'd be nice to know and I wasn't here umpteen years ago when they said that. I think it's good to know how much we in the town are helping to subsidize the trust by having their property. I think the trust is a great idea, don't get me wrong, but I really would like to know what the tax impact is of all the land and property they've had. And again,
Well,
I
yes.
support what they're doing.
yeah, but you see, you know, you use the term subsidize, and that immediately brings the question, well, why should we take property off the tax rolls? Why should we subsidize conservation? And, you know, I just think it's an irrelevant question as far as I'm concerned. You're entitled to an answer, but it is something that can engender a different discussion. People starting off their discussion not the way you did, as being in favor of it, but being opposed to it because property is being taken off the tax rolls.
I think it's okay for people to be in favor or opposed. I'm just asking a simple question. I'd
Okay.
like to know of all the properties, particularly this latest one, but all the properties, frankly, that the trust has, what the tax impact is on the town. Because at some point, there are a lot of pressures that people have as they put the budgets together, et cetera. And I assume at some point they're going to be aggravated by it. Again, I think it's a great idea. It's quite exciting, actually.
You see,
And I'm in favor of it. But
The
I'd like
tax,
to know.
this is, the amount that's being taken off the tax roll is really something that you cannot tell just by raw land, because the raw land could be developed, and there would be taxes on improvements on that raw land. You know, so it's a sort of a geometric progression.
I don't need the geometric progression.
Well,
Whatever it was is raw fields.
You know, it also plays into the concept of quality of life. There are people that live in this community largely because of access to the ocean and to the forests and to the beauty of the trails that Carol so well pointed out. And if you're going to ask how much money is lost to the town by allowing this land to be conserved and developed into community accessible property, then you need to ask how much would be lost if you didn't have those trails, if you didn't have people coming, buying property, spending their money in town, et cetera. They're intangibles that really can't be played one against the other.
I understand
in my
those
opinion.
things. I just asked a simple question. It's interesting to me how people respond to that.
Because
The
it's a
number's a number.
loaded
It doesn't matter
question.
whether just nice to know the number.
I'm sorry, but this is not a beach advisory committee subject. I'm really sorry.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Great job. Thank you very much for telling us about it.
Thank
Take
you.
the pressure off. Jim, your question's great. I've heard it argued places, but this is not a beach advisory committee in our purview, period. I'm sorry.
Okay.
I don't agree.
Okay, anybody else? Then we're going to move on to the presentation, Healthy Beaches. And I'm going to let our town manager, Laurie Smith, introduce the people from, the person from Healthy Beaches, and I assume the Director of Public Health from the town. Laurie?
Hi.
Hi.
So Richard asked me to just also update you guys on some numbers from the summer.
So how do you think the summer went?
Pretty quiet.
It was great, Lori!
Hey, wonderful. Now tell
It was
us,
especially great now that we have snow on the ground.
Go for it.
So, I just wanted to put it in perspective for you. So in terms of beach stickers, we had a total of 9,189 stickers this year. That includes daily is the largest part of that category at 6,000, and residents next at 2,500 about. So we had 9,189 stickers in 2018. That compares in 2017 with 8,448 stickers. And you can, in 2017, we had a few more resident stickers, about 500 more resident stickers. But we had fewer daily stickers. So we did see dailies increase quite a bit this year. In terms of violations, parking violations, we had 664 parking violations. That was down by, I'd say, about 80 violations from 2017. In 2016, it was more similar to that. In terms of dog violations, we had 19, which compared exactly to 2016, but we were up from 2017. This year we had 0 fireworks complaints. I don't know if anybody noticed fireworks around or heard noises, but we did not get any complaints at the police department. Loud music on the beach, we had 2 violations this year compared to 1 last year. Drinking alcohol, we had 2 violations. No model rockets, no sleeping on the beach. We did have 2 complaints on beach fires. This year, that was new, we had a motorized vehicle on the beach. And we are working on rules and regulations for the Selectmen's consideration regarding motorized vehicles on the beach. This year we also had 2 citations for dog violations. There were a couple of dogs down at the West End that their owners were from outside of Maine, we'll say, and they did get violations. And we also had 1 dog bite violation that we had to report. So that's kind of a wrap-up of the summer. Any questions?
good summer.
Good summer. Remember at the beginning?
Yeah,
It
good
was a
summer.
great summer.
I refer to those parking stickers as hunting licenses.
Hunting licenses? Because they're hunting for the beach, parking.
Hunting for a
Parking space, yes.
So now we are going to move on to Maine Healthy Beach presentation. And I'm going to invite Allison and Werner up here. So Allison Kennebunkport is our Director of Public Health, and the Public Health Department has overseen our water quality testing. And Werner Gilliam is our Director of Planning and Development. And this year, Werner helped oversee one of our interns who was involved with the Maine Healthy Beach testing this summer as well. Do you guys want to say anything about how this summer and testing went?
Sure, yes. I have a whole little spiel that I was gonna say, but
Go ahead.
we had, okay, so I'll do my spiel. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Allison Kennebunkport, Director of Public Health, and thanks for having us here tonight, and we're gonna talk to you about our beach testing that we did at Goose Rock St. Colony Beach this summer, what we did, what we're planning to do in the future next year, and I'll just mention Megan Sims is our Maine Healthy Beach connection, and Noah Sargent, who is sitting next to her, worked for AmeriCorps, who also helped with Maine Healthy Beach this summer. And then Kendra O'Rourke was our summer intern that we hired through the town to help us do all this extra beach testing this summer. So that's what and then I was just gonna go into some history of our.
Go right ahead.
Okay, I didn't know if you had anything to.
Do you want to talk a little bit about how it was with Kendra?
Yeah, no, this was great. So we had 2 interns in our office over the summer, and Kendra O'Rourke was one of those interns who handled water quality testing for the beach, which I'm sure many of you met her.
You gotta talk to the mic so she can.
And so it was a busy summer, and so Kendra was able to do quite a bit of work with water quality testing. She was also able to learn quite a bit from staff, regarding septic systems in terms of design and construction. So we were able to take her on site. She was able to see a number of sites under construction, as well as interact with property owners as we did property visits as well. So. Overall, I think it was successful in terms of the public outreach piece of it, and I think it was a great opportunity for a college intern to be able to see a little bit of the real world as it relates to how we deal with subsurface waste and how that may tie to water quality.
So let me just say a couple words in a minute. So the last time we did a big survey was in 2006. Yes?
Yes.
And Werner was just breaking through the egg at that point. No, he had come here. He used to be the youngest guy here, but now he's getting old. So Werner was brand new here, and that's how he got introduced to Kennebunkport. And we gathered a lot of good information. But I think at some point the town felt like one and done, we did that. We checked that box off, did the survey, and found what we needed. And as we talked more with Steve Hanna and John Crowder and Paul Hogan, who have been a part of this analysis as well, is that, it's going to be a forevermore. You really have to be putting time and energy into this on a regular basis, because you can solve one problem and another develops, and especially when it comes to water quality. So the town and the selectmen and the budget board agreed to commit funds to the intern, as well as some funding to do some testing, and Maine Healthy Beach has been phenomenal in terms of supporting us, and also having Noah come down and helping us with testing, because when you're trying to do all this testing within a certain time frame of the tide, it's hard to be everywhere at once. And also they've been covering the costs of a lot of the testing, so that's been great. And so why did we do this year? Because we still see these high bacteria counts in the water testing, and it's very frustrating. And we, when we look at where we are in comparison to other beaches in the state who are part of this program, remember this is voluntary, we thought that there was improvement there, and we wanted to be better. And so we did put a lot of energy and effort in this summer, and we learned a lot, and we didn't quite get as far as you think. It's like when you graduate from college and you think your life's complete, and then you graduate from college and you realize how much there is still to learn. And that's kind of where we are, that there is still a lot to learn and a lot of energy. But I'm going to just turn it over to Allison, and she'll give you a little background of where we have been, and introduce Megan, who will give you a presentation.
Okay, so a little history. Kennebunkport did start participating with Maine Healthy Beaches back in 2004, and with water sampling at the beach. And Maine Healthy Beach was established to ensure that Maine's saltwater beaches remain safe for water contact. The program brings together communities to perform standardized monitoring of the beach water quality, and to notify the public of any health risks if there's any detected, like high bacteria levels. To educate residents and visitors on what you can do to help keep Maine beaches healthy. Maine Healthy Beach is a unique partnership among municipalities, state parks, University of Maine Cooperative Extension, Maine Department of Environmental Protection, nonprofit organizations, state and federal agencies, all committed to improving the water quality of our beaches and focusing on sharing resources and problem solving. So we have been testing the waters at Goose Rocks and Colony Beach weekly from Memorial Day till Labor Day, and since 2004. And field monitoring involves water samples, measurement of the air and water temperatures, salinity, weather conditions, and any other observations or conditions that the volunteers might notice when they're out collecting these samples that might affect water quality. For example, rainfall is a big effector of the water quality. Our samples must be to the lab within 6 hours of collection, and they're resulted back to us in 24 to 36 hours later. The lab is testing for enterococci bacteria, and if the levels are elevated, we post the beach. Elevated is over 104, if that's a number anyone wants. But we post the beach with a contamination advisory. We post it at our, I put it on the town website, at the public health office, and we sell beach stickers, Goose Rock store, police station, town office. It's all posted with the advisories. And we also post for rainfall advisory if there's an inch or more of rain, because a lot of times rainfall affects the bacteria. So when the rainfall advisories or the contamination is up, we leave them up for 24 hours or 2 tidal cycles to at least flush out the system. If it's a contamination advisory, we do have retesting going on just till we test till it's back down to regular levels. The advisory suggests that water contact is avoided, but people swim at their own risk. This summer, we did increase, as we said, we had an intern, we increased our beach testing, and we tested Goose Rocks 3 times a week, and we tested Colony Beach twice a week. We also took in the watershed area of Goose Rocks, and we did 10 separate watershed testing days up all the different rivers, and you'll see a slide in a few minutes about that. We did it every 2 weeks on an outgoing tide cycle throughout the summer, 2 hours before low tide, so that for continuity. In September and October, we were able to collect 3 separate collection dates of DNA testing, and it's been sent off to the UNH, University of New Hampshire lab for testing. And this is all to try to determine what might be contributing to our elevated bacteria levels at the beach. And the DNA is being tested for human, fowl, dog, ruminant, and mammals. And I will turn this over to Megan now.
Thank you, Allison. Let me just pull this up. All right, can everyone see that? Is this close enough to this microphone? All right. So as Allison said, my name is Megan Sims. I'm the program coordinator for the Healthy Beaches program. It's a statewide effort to monitor coastal beaches. We have communities volunteer to participate in our program, and we span Kittery to Mount Desert. So Kennebunkport has been in the program almost since the beginning, since the program started, way before I was with the program. And like I said, from the beaches side of things, it was myself and Noah, but really the kudos go to Allison and Kendra and Noah. They were really on the ground out there collecting the samples. I did a couple of times, but really wasn't my work that was doing that. But I get to be the one to talk to you all, so I guess that's my job today. And Noah took this lovely picture of Goose Rocks Beach. And so just, you guys, you live here, you know your beach, but just for background before we get into the details, Goose Rocks Beach watershed, this is an image from that 2006 study that was done by some consultants paid for by the town. And so just showing the proportion of the watershed that is associated with Kennebunkport and Biddeford, and the sub-watersheds that we focused on again for this revisit of the sites. And so those are the Little River, the Batson River, and Smith Brook. And as Allison said, we often move beyond our routine beach monitoring when we're noticing elevated levels at the beach. When we notice consistent high bacteria counts, it's not okay just to continue monitoring and posting advisories, but we really want to figure out what's causing that and try to help communities find and fix those issues. And so this was done, as Lori said, in 2005, 2006 timeframe to try to assess what was going on. And we picked this up and revisited it in 2018 to try to continue this work and see if those issues are still an issue and try to help you guys, the town, figure out what's going on. And these are examples of those advisories that Allison was telling you about. Communities across the coast post contamination advisories and also rainfall advisories. It's just for public awareness, and again, it's not closing a beach, it's not forcing people out of the water. Everyone's still welcome to make their own choices, but we just want to give the public the information so that they can make an informed decision about their beach activities. This is an example of the report that was generated after that 2006 study, and so just to tell you briefly what they did, the town contracted with these consultants, and they did many of the similar things that we picked back up. They did some water quality testing, they did some GIS work, they provided recommendations, and they tried to help the town secure additional funding to continue this work. And so part of that was identifying hotspots, so these sites within the watershed that were the highest for bacteria and other pollution source markers. And they tried to better understand where those pollution sources might be coming from. Were they septic systems? Were there different farms, agriculture, things like that? Dogs can also be an issue, as you all probably are well aware. And also they indicated in that report that they suspected human sources at a number of their sites. And so that's really where we wanted to come back and try to assess that in a bigger way, try to help suss out those sources. And in their recommendations, they suggested some of these new methods that were coming about. And keep in mind, this was 2006, we're in 2018, so these methods have come a long way, and we now are able to partner with places like the University of New Hampshire to try to get at some of these answers in a more cost-effective way. So before I talk about the bacteria levels, I want to tell you, let's just kind of go over some of the potential sources of bacterial pollution. And so this is just kind of a cartoony diagram, but it gets at the major points. So we have the one at the bottom that I added in was faulty infrastructure cross connections. I can't tell you how many communities that I've worked with that everything looks fine, but they're still seeing high bacteria, and they see toilet paper in the water, and they can't figure out where it's coming from, and they figured out that this home that had a septic, but then they're off the septic and they were tied into the sewer line. When the person went to tie them in, they tied them into the stormwater line instead. They just dug it up, found a line, tied them in, and that's a cross connection, and then that was the source of pollution in some of these watersheds. They found it, they fixed it, bacteria problem was gone. We don't often find those smoking guns, but we're happy when we do and we can fix those issues. But you also have people, swimmers. People are their own source of bacteria. Failing septic systems is a big one. Boat discharge, pets. There are a number of communities where they have looked into the specific DNA sources, and they found dogs are contributing in certain areas of the beach where people aren't being respectful and picking up their pet waste. And particularly, as Allison said, when that rains, anything that's on the land is mobilized to any kind of water source, and it's taken to the beach. Also, livestock and things we want in our watershed, like beavers, deers, wildlife, things like that, they can all contribute to poor water quality. And when we use some of the traditional tools, we're trying to get at these questions of what's the source? How strong is that source? How can we find that? What is the human health risk to the bacteria numbers that we see at the beach? How can we prioritize the resources that the town has and that we have to better figure out what's going on at these beach sites? And so over the years, we've coined the term a pollution source tracking toolbox. These are our tools in the toolbox, and it's a kind of cheesy, but it gets the point across that there are a number of different parameters that we and other groups have looked at over the course of the last 10, 12, 15 years. The primary ones that we use are the top two, the bacteria, the enterococcus, and the optical brighteners. Optical brighteners are just whitening agents. They're in toothpaste, they're in laundry detergents, and so they're in your laundry water. So you can if you find that within a water body, then you know that there's some sort of gray water, some sort of improper connection that's letting that extra water be put into a water body. So that's a cheap way to try to figure out a human source. But over the course of time, we've looked at pharmaceuticals. I don't know if any of you have seen, in I think York and Kittery and Old Orchard have used the sewage sniffing canines, these dogs that are trained to sniff out human feces, and they'll take them into storm drains, or they'll take them to the beach, and I think one of them barks and then one of them sits down, and they tell you that there's a source. And they've tested them, they've followed up with sampling, and they're spot on. They're trained to do it. I mean, they can sniff out all kinds of things. Why not human waste? So the newest one that we're trying to incorporate into our watershed testing is what's called, it's at the bottom, called microbial source tracking. It's basically DNA testing, but it's kind of the popular phrase for what we're doing. And I don't expect you to get into the nitty-gritty of this, but the whole purpose of MST, or microbial source tracking, is to target specific organisms that live in dogs, that live in cows, that live in deer, that live in humans, and to test the water for those specific organisms because they are unique to that type of animal. And then we can see their waste is what is actually in that water body. When we test for bacteria, it's just bacteria from a warm-blooded host. We don't know if it's a human, we don't know if it's a dog, we don't know what source it is. And so this allows us to better understand where that where that bacteria is coming from, so that we can address those issues. Allison is going to tell you where the sites are, since I don't live here.
So we took these, we took the hot spots from that study that was done back in 2005, 2006, and their hot spots is where we started to go from. So starting at I'll just start at the bottom of the map, and Goose Rocks 5, everyone knows where that is, the west end of the beach. BR1 is just up the river a little bit. BR2 and BR3, that's right by Route 9 at the bridge where usually there's some form of a waterfall, but this summer there was no waterfall because it was so dry at the beginning.
No, that's the general store.
No, BR3 and BR2 is right near like Beechwood Road, where Beechwood Road comes in and Route 9.
The lake on one side and the waterfall on the other.
And then
A pond on one side.
moving up the beach to campground. Campground number 1 is on the inside, just off where the campground is. SB2, SB3, Smith as the Smith Brook part of it. SB3 is right by the Goose Rock store at the bridge. And SB4 is on Dyke Road, kind of where it's real close to the road. SB5 and SB6. So SB5 is the east side of Route 9, and SB6 would be the other side of Route 9 towards the Clock Farm, on the Clock Farm side. Going up to the top of the map there, BP4 is on one side of the New Biddeford Road, and BP2 is right where there's a storm drain that kind of comes under the road right there, and it has a little kind of a open area collection. And BP3 is kind of into Beaver Pond, a little more through the marsh. And BP1 is down by, actually that site marking is a little off. We took the samples by the bridge on where Kings Highway, where it crosses under Kings Highway.
Standpoint, yeah.
The samples. And then Little River was up Kings Highway where they can put the kayaks in off that road.
And then Goose Rocks 1.
And Goose Rocks 1, sorry.
So these were the areas that were visited over the course of that watershed testing, some more so than others. We added sites as we got results back, and where we saw particularly high bacteria, then we continued to move further upland to try to figure out where that source was coming from. And as Allison said, there were 10 events. We particularly looked at bacteria and optical brighteners, but we were able to squeeze in some DNA testing right at the very end of the season. And the sources that we tested for, which are the ones that we have been testing for in other watersheds this year and in years previous to this, are mammals just in general, because we like to understand the mammal so that we can understand how much human is a component of that. Humans, birds, and we can do gulls specifically, and so it can be part of birds, but we can also do it specifically if a community has a huge gull issue. Also ruminants, so cattle, deer, sheep, and dogs, of course. Oh, I don't know why that happened. There we go. And so what I wanted to focus on today was that we do care about some of those other sources because they can help us tailor outreach if it's around dogs, or they can help us let people know if it's a bird issue, if people are feeding birds and concentrating them into one spot, we can deal with that. If they're deer, it helps to know that that might be where bacteria is coming from, but really what we're concerned about are the human sources. So the top, it's just an example, the top pictures, just issues maybe with sewer lines. The middle two pictures are examples of stormwater, and then the bottom pictures are an example of an issue with the septic system. So these are some of the common human sources that we're concerned with, and some of the things that we really can try to tackle if we're having issues with human DNA. I don't show you this figure to show you numbers or parameters or anything like that, but I will just say that the top graph is bacteria and the bottom one are those optical brighteners. And what we do with that information is we put them together, and where I have these circles, we look at areas where it's common, where both are high. And in those areas, we have a stronger likelihood that there might be a human source contributing to the high bacteria, because optical brighteners are associated with a human source generally. And so what we do is we use this bacteria information and this optical brightener information to verify, we use this season to verify that those hot spots that they found in 2006 were still an issue. Or maybe we have new issues that are in different areas that we didn't know about, or some of the issues are gone. We need to know where we stand now. It's been 12 years later. We have to reevaluate. As Lori said, we have to keep looking at this. We use that information to prioritize the additional DNA tests. Those tests, I said, are more affordable now, but they're not cheap. And we're all often working on some sort of shoestring budget, particularly with the Beaches program being federally funded. We don't always have a lot of extra money, and so we have to prioritize where we're going to test. We can't just test everywhere we want to. And also, we did this to help the town focus on their investigations, particularly some septic investigations, but also we've used it with other towns where they focus, they do camera tests on all of their sewer lines and their stormwater lines, and we've helped communities prioritize where they best could spend those funds to use those cameras and those lines. And so that's really the purpose of collecting this information. This is NOAA. This is that waterfall area. It was actually a waterfall this day that we went out. And so this is NOAA collecting a DNA sample there. He didn't know I was going to put him in this PowerPoint, but here he is. And so right now, I would love to show you all kinds of fancy DNA results and show you all of the examples, but they're still analyzing them. We just finished this watershed testing, and it takes some time for UNH to get all of these details. And so when that information is available, we will certainly provide those details, but I just don't have them right now. I have some of them, but they haven't all come in, so I'm not going to just give you a teaser without giving you the full story. And so what I want to explain to you before you see those results when they come is what MST, what DNA testing is the most useful for. It's useful to follow up at these hotspots to make sure that bacteria is actually bacteria of concern. So in some areas we can have high bacteria, but it might not actually be a bad thing. It might be a natural thing in the system, like marsh systems. I'm deviating from this. In marshes, we can have high bacteria that kind of lives in the sediment, lives in the water if it's not really moving, and it's not a human health risk like human DNA is, or fresh dog DNA. So it helps us figure out where these hotspots are and to follow up on them. We can identify the specific sources, like I said. We can refine those spots, so we can move upland and watersheds, and if the strength of that DNA signal, so it's in a number, if that number gets higher and higher and higher, we're getting closer to the source of where that bacteria could be coming from, where that human source could be coming from. And then what we see in a lot of our communities is a seasonal component. So it's particularly areas that have a huge influx of visitors to their beaches, and they have seasonal residences, seasonal cottages. They see this boom in the bacteria in their streams and their rivers, and that's areas where maybe there's pressure placed on some of the infrastructure, some of the systems in their homes weren't designed to have this many people in the house, if they have a lot of visitors, and so it helps us assess if this is more of a seasonal component in some cases. And for the Beaches program, we're all about providing recommendations and helping the community to prioritize. So that's why we use this DNA. And I'm going to let Werner talk about some of the septic work they did. These are not his pictures. I just threw some pictures in there. I just needed some pretty things for you to look at.
Great, thanks. So, as part of the research, we looked at the watershed areas that affect Goose Rocks Beach, and identified about 198 properties that are serviced by septic systems, kind of in the in the immediate area, and that includes properties that are on the beach side of Route 9, as well as some properties that are on the inland side of Route 9. And so what that research involved was going through the property files and looking for septic designs. And so what we found was that 78 of those properties had septics installed after the year 2000. So we grouped them into groups based on age. And 72 of those had septic systems that were installed before 2000. We had 48 properties that we didn't know. We didn't have any information regarding the septic system in terms of the type, the location, or the age. As we narrowed that information down, we sent out letters to property owners requesting authority to come onto their property to do specific, more detailed site research. Of the letters that were sent out, we were able to obtain permission from a relatively small number of property owners, as you could imagine. So about 10 of those property owners allowed us permission to access their property. I will say of those 10 that we visited, they were properties that were all either in extreme close proximity to the marsh areas or directly abutting the marsh areas. So of those 10, we felt that they were good properties to visit. And a number of those we did some dye testing on. You can see what the results of what in these pictures here where you see the green kind of coming across the surface of the ground. That's what we would have expected to see if we were to have found a site that was in direct failure. Of the number that we did do dye tests and follow-ups on, none were found to be in a state of failure. So no, as Megan spoke, no smoking guns per se that arose from the properties that we visited that were, again, the ones that we were granted access to that were directly on the marsh areas. So.
So just to bring it all together, this season in 2018, the beaches monitoring was increased to try to further hone in and tackle what might be causing this bacteria issues at the beach. We did bacteria, optical brightener, follow-up and identification of new sites in some cases. We did some preliminary DNA testing, and I will say there were some, in the results that I've seen so far, there are some human detections. Again, the results will be forthcoming. And we still need to continue those human tests and test for mammal, canine, ruminant, birds, and gulls. They're doing it right now. So once it's ready, it will be shared. And then the septic surveys will be ongoing, as Werner mentioned, as they can get permission and do some more investigations and get some more information about the age of these systems, just to better understand any potential sources from these septics. But as Lori said, there's more to be done. This is not a one and done. Things don't always happen perfectly with sampling and contracts and things like that. So we plan to as I like to say, transform this data into some action. So we've already done that in a big way, and I will commend the town for the amount of effort that they have put into this. I've worked with a number of communities all along Maine's coast, and I have to say I don't often work with a community as engaged as this one. And so it's been definitely, yes, please do. It's been, it's tough. Bacteria is frustrating, and these sources and finding and feeling like you're trying to fix these issues, it can be frustrating, but their willingness to kind of just keep working with me and to keep trying to look at these issues and to be open-minded that it's going to take some time is huge. And so we're going to continue this enhanced monitoring. That's why the Beaches program is here, to help track and verify. If they do find a source and they remove it, do some more sampling. Is that source gone? Is the bacteria better? Okay, where's the next source? Because these problems, they just keep coming up and coming up. And so continuing that bacteria, the optical brighteners, the DNA, and whatever else we can throw at it with the funding that we have. And what we've talked about with the town is, some more ideas around education and outreach, because sometimes people don't even know they have a septic system. So people need to be educated. When people visit and there's areas that are seasonal use cottages, seasonal use homes, some of those people don't necessarily know that the home that they're renting has a septic system. They're not treating that properly. And when was the last time those things were pumped out? And I harp on septics, but they're not the only source. But people with dogs, people who feed birds, it's all about education. And so some of these issues, they just need some more education around these particular sources. We encourage communities always to continue these infrastructure upgrades and tie in when it's possible to sewer lines and just expand these areas, because the infrastructure, particularly in New England, it's degrading. It's old. It's been in the ground for a long time, and it's costly, and these take time. Continuing property surveys, because if it wasn't an issue now, it might be an issue next year. It's not just because it wasn't an issue one year doesn't mean that it's going to be good for forever. And then we've talked a lot about improving signage, improving information at the beach, expanding beach monitoring to other sites to try to find better places that people could swim. If there are high bacteria counts in one spot over another, then encourage people to use the other areas, because you guys have beautiful beaches and they don't all have high bacteria. And so where can people swim that's the safest for their families? And this is an example I like to give people around education and outreach. If you use DNA testing and you figure out the source, you can target your outreach and help continue to keep these sources out of the water. And so that's all I'll say. And if there's questions, I'm happy to answer those, or for other people as well. Yes.
I think it's also important just to note, when we talk about additional testing, the DNA testing we did was this fall, in the end of September and in October. And of course, what the beach is like then. And so that's why we're going to continue to do more of that next year, in the early summer and in the height of the summer. It changes, and that's why it's better to get a whole picture rather than assume based on this fall testing that we understand the whole story. Secondly, when it rains, we are experiencing higher bacteria counts. And so even just looking at the beach is not going to solve this issue, and identifying when it does rain what those contaminations are and where they're coming from. And Steve Hanna and John Crowder were talking recently about trying to collect some additional rain data. I've been working with them on that, to combine that with our historical data that we have. So it is a very layered and complicated. People think, well, once you find it, then you should just find the solution. But it is a complex situation, and we're doing our best to resolve the situations we can.
I have two things.
Bill, could you go up to the mic, please, because it is being recorded?
I have two things. My wife's a realtor, so I'm sort of in tune to that. Do you notify the rental agents of these concerns so that they can inform the renters of what to be careful about that you're concerned about?
We haven't, but we should.
All right. There's a new item for your agenda. Secondly, I'm a member of the Kennebunkport Side Rotary, and I want to give a plug. because our club has been cleaning up Goose Rock's beach, not the water, but the beach itself, for the last 25 years as part of a state program to keep the beaches in Maine clean. And the latter part of September, every year, we go out and we clean up the sand. And what's been interesting is, over the course of the years, we found less and less cigarette butts.
I wonder, Verna, could you tell us where the 10 septics that you, properties that you were able to access, were they septics that were put in after 2000, before 2000, or any of them where you had no record?
So they were actually they were a mix. It wasn't defined towards one or the other. I can tell you, generally speaking, the area that that we focused on were properties that were along New Biddeford Road, and so there were the ones in New Biddeford, Beaver Pond, a couple on Mills Road, and then we also spent some time in the campground as well.
Do you have, as the code enforcement officer, do you have any ability to go onto properties where there is a suspicion that maybe the septic tanks have failed?
Well, what I tell folks is that as a code enforcement officer, I generally have the authority to go where the UPS guy goes. And so that's usually, when entering a property, I have access to the front door. I don't necessarily have the right or the authority to enter a property and walk around the property without the consent of the property owner. With that being said, I think it depends on the type of evidence that has been brought forward. That would suggest that there's a system that's in a state of failure versus what we would classify as a marginal system. It's just from looking at the numbers and based on how where we're dealing with higher bacteria counts on rain events. I think part of the reason why this is so tricky is that my sense is that we're not running into systems that are outright direct failures, but instead potentially ones that I would classify that are in the marginal area, ones that don't necessarily present that wouldn't necessarily present to the surface or give you any direct evidence of any outright outbreak. Systems that would be kind of clear and obvious. That there's that you're seeing an odor or a specific wet spot. Things like that. So. Again, it's tricky, without any direct evidence that would, that I could discuss with the property owner. It's very difficult for me to just based on, well, here, you're at this water body. I'd like to access your property and walk around and look for problems. So.
Laura, I'm just curious. I think this is interesting. This is currently in its infancy. It's got obviously a place to go. I just was curious about the cost. Is there some overall cost you can just tell us what it's costing? I mean, there's obviously value here. Is it our budget, the Beach Advisory Committee budget that's being taken out, or do you have it otherwhere? I'm just curious what this costs roughly.
So some of it we did budget in the Goose Rocks Beach Advisory reserve budget this year. So costs this year were certainly the intern to pay for Kendra's time. That was probably the biggest cost. And then we did budget some monies for testing. So we also did receive a donation from the campground this year as part of their planning board approval. They agreed to do that. And that funding we set aside to do testing as well. But as I said, Maine Healthy Beach has also been very forthcoming with funding that they had to support us, because remember we went from once a week testing to 3 times a week in terms of water. Then we did the additional upriver testing, and then we did the DNA. And the DNA is the more expensive piece to that, and of course everything that you test for, if you add canines, if you add gulls, if you add, that all adds to that. So UNH has been a good partner in terms of the cost effectiveness of this. So it's really been a shared approach.
Three brief questions. So you would have just done the regular testing over 3 times a week at Goose Rocks Beach for like 8 or 9 or 10 weeks?
Yes, our routine testing typically for our normal beaches
Yeah.
is 1 time a week, but they increased it to 3 times a week for during, between Memorial Day and Labor Day as our beaches season.
Okay, so you had about 30 readings, 30 tests. What percentage of those did you have to issue advisories for? And of that, how much were rainfall versus contamination?
I do not have that in front of me, but I can get that for you.
Well, I mean, nice to know, and maybe you have more to do for us to come back with more.
Yes,
Yeah,
yeah.
we thought we were gonna get some other figures today, but it's not done yet, so you will come back at another time scheduled by Richard to.
Sure,
Okay. and
absolutely.
The other thing is, you may not wanna say it, but you have some idea of the human loci for
We know
where
that
the
human
problems?
DNA is present, but that's all we know. We don't have the details just yet, so it will be coming once
Okay.
I have all of
Including
the
the
data.
locations of it,
Yes.
okay.
Any other questions from the committee, the public?
Good job, good start.
Thank you very
Good
much.
start, yes.
Lori, are you going to stick around for a little bit, or are you leaving? Okay. Before we get into maybe some negatives, there was at least one letter to the chief of police from someone on New Biddeford Road complimenting the town for putting in speed bumps, saying that it was a substantial difference in terms of speeding on New Biddeford Road. And hopefully we can do that next year. We bought them, we might just as well use them. There was a complaint about plowing of sidewalks at Goose Rocks Beach, and I think we've heard this before. The person indicated that, or alleged, that the plowing dug up part of their lawn and their sprinkler system, and suggests that we not do it unless we can do it carefully. I suspect that given the nature of Goose Rocks and how much all of us encroach on municipal rights of way, you too, Barbara, the likelihood is that part of those lawns were in the town right of way, but it is an issue, and I'm Lori, if we could just have the guys be a little bit careful when they do the sidewalks, but I think it's something that we have to do. All right. And there was, Kate, are you familiar with the issue on the brochure?
No.
There apparently was a sentence or so in the brochure about leaving the beach clean and so on. And one resident said that the brochure this past year did not have that, and I didn't have a brochure
No, I
for
didn't
2
either.
years.
I can check on it.
So before we order the new brochures for 19, maybe we could see whether or not there was something that
I will.
was deleted.
I'll check with Joanne too to see if she may have more info on
Something
that.
about
Maybe.
hole, I think, something about filling up holes as well.
That's right, maybe that could say, leave only footprints and fill in the
Yeah.
holes.
And then there was an issue last year in terms of the stones on the entranceways, and the Public Works Department has already put them there. There are a number of trash cans that will be there probably until we really have heavy snow, and then they may be put away. Righty. At the last meeting, we had a lengthy discussion about delivery of kayaks and a handicap parking space on Jeffries Way. The residents of Jeffries Way have raised the issue of both safety and intrusion into private property. A number of the residents have put obstacles in their driveway so people cannot turn around. Jeffries Way is narrow, dead-end, no place for a public turnaround. So the safety issue was raised because I'm not sure how many companies, but at least 2 companies deliver kayaks. And they have a pickup truck and a trailer. And they drive down Jeffries Way, deliver, and then have to back up Jeffries Way. The handicap space makes it difficult to maneuver because it takes up half of the cartway. And there is a lot of pedestrian traffic, and we anticipate in the next year or two the pedestrian traffic will increase because of the 25 or so houses that are going to be constructed on Binnacle Hill. So we're not going to make a recommendation tonight, but it's just open for discussion as to let's do the handicap space first. I know a number of you have gone to Jeffries Way, looked at it. I know Lori, we talked with the chief about that, and he was going to see whether there was an alternate space on New Bedford Road, not for the handicap, but to provide an additional space on New Bedford. Do you know whether he did that measurement?
He didn't get back to me on that, so I'd have to double check with him.
Okay, but I'm pretty sure that what we were talking about was just moving the sign on New Bedford Road, which says no parking beyond this area, to allow one more car. We have in the beach use agreement and the ordinance a provision for 173 parking spaces. We cannot increase that, and we don't want to decrease it. So the suggestion, and I believe the chief was in favor of it, was to move the handicap space to probably Edgewood on Kings Highway, where there is a mat that allows easier access to the beach. So moving that handicap space from Jeffries Way to Kings Highway, and to replace the space that is a non-handicap space on Kings Highway, replace it with a space on New Bedford Road. So we're not moving the handicap space further away from the beach. Actually, we'd be moving it closer to the beach.
That would be 3 at Edgewood.
Pardon me?
That would be 3 at Edgewood.
Well, Barbers, you have the mat there, which allows much easier access for someone.
I have no issue with handicap parking. I have an issue with moving it from Jeffries Way.
Well,
We have one at Dyke, we have 2 at Jeffries, we have one on,
no, we have one at Jeffries.
one at Dyke, one at Jeffries, 2 at Edgewood. gives handicapped people access to the beach, all in.
You know, that's true there, but there is the issue of maneuvering on Jeffries Way, and there's also the problem on Jeffries Way of people driving there and dropping off, and then they have to back up their car, or they have to pull into someone's driveway to turn around. So
That's
one thing that was suggested was at least seasonally making Jeffries Way a local traffic only, no drop-off, no commercial deliveries. That doesn't mean UPS or FedEx. And essentially designating it as a pedestrian way as opposed to a travel way.
As long as we're not removing a handicap from Jeffries Way to accommodate the delivery of kayaks.
No, the removal of the handicap space is separate, the suggestion is separate and apart from the kayak delivery.
He goes down, backs out.
Well, we'll deal with the kayak second. The issue is the safety of Jeffries Way, and to make it more pedestrian friendly, less traffic, and that includes moving the handicap space.
Richard?
Yeah.
If we did choose to seasonally make Jeffries Way residents only, would that make moving the handicap moot? I think it might.
Well, it might. It might. The chief of police, when we talked to him about it, did suggest that it was an impediment to the use of Jeffries Way. And that
Other than
includes
residents.
the residents who certainly will be able to ingress and egress Jeffries Way.
But they have a driveway to turn in. You can, I don't see where that's really much of an impediment. Nothing like backing up a kayak trailer.
Yeah, well, and the other, we haven't resolved the kayak thing. We'll talk about that in a minute. But there's also the question as to whether or not the handicap space is better off in Kings Highway for somebody who's handicapped as opposed to in Jeffries Way. Because in Jeffries Way, you have to, yes, you have a pavement, but then you're a long way from the hard sand. There's
Like
a lot of
Dyke,
soft
just like
sand there.
Dyke, just like Dyke.
But in Edgewood, you do have the mat that crosses over the,
But there's two there already.
But make them all in.
I mean, a handicap space with access is a handicap space, whether it's in Jeffries Way or it's in.
Yeah, but if you wanted to go to Little River and I were handicapped, I'd much rather access that from Jeffries Way than I would from Edgewood. So, it's a matter of giving full access to the beach. If you make that, if that decision's made, then, I think they are connected, I guess is what I'm saying.
Okay, well, this is a number of stage process. We talk about it, we make a recommendation, the selectmen then talk about it and either agree or disagree. So,
But again, both issues, I think, they're connected, they're related.
so let's go to the kayak. That's really a knotty issue. It is a commercial business, but they do not have a permanent commercial establishment on the beach. or any permanent space. One of the things that we talked about, and I don't know whether Lori has an answer yet, whether the general store would object to the kayaks being delivered there as opposed to Jeffrey's Way, so that we could prohibit the kayak vendors from delivering on Jeffrey's Way. And I don't know, Lori, have you gotten any response from the general store?
So from our meeting, I was gonna talk to Werner, but I never had a plan to talk to the general store. So I was talking to Werner about the use issue with the general store, but I did not reach out to the general store.
What was Werner's conclusion?
It depends on what kind of business is transacted there, is what happens. It's the question of if someone is just delivering something versus taking money for it versus having a training session. You know, the question is, what is the scope of what would happen there?
Well, what we're talking about is them doing the same thing as Jeffrey's Way, so that there will be an exchange of money, but we're not talking about them having a permanent space in the general store. So I don't see why delivering them at the general store is any different from delivering them at the West End or Jeffrey's Way.
So the answer is it depends, is the simple answer. So we can discuss whether it should be different or not. It's just that sometimes when situations develop, things change, and people increase that. And I think we would need to talk to those rental companies to understand what their plan would be. But I think someone needs to reach out to the general store to see if that's even an option.
Okay, well, of course, I guess the first question is, do we think that there is a safety issue? And if there is a safety issue, then we probably should find some, maybe we should find some way to preclude them from using Jeffrey's Way to deliver. I mean, because that's how the issue arose, was people saying they're pedestrians, they're vehicles, commercial vehicles that are backing up because that's the only way they can get out of Jeffrey's Way. But then, you know, and then it sort of multiplied in that we talk about drop-offs on Jeffrey's Way, and then we talked about the handicap space. So that I know you've talked to the town attorney, and there are some things that we could do, but I suspect that there will be some pushback from the selectmen if we recommend a proposal that would eliminate a commercial operation or eliminate a commercial vendor's business opportunities. And that's the...
Well, Richard, we're not eliminating their commercial opportunities. We're eliminating their access, and I would extend this honestly to the drop-offs and pickups too, on a fairly narrow, short street, which has apparently, I've not been there in the height of the summer, so I haven't seen the degree of pedestrian traffic, but I understand from what everybody has said that it's substantial. And I think that we need to put that as a paramount issue, and I would hope that the selectmen would feel the same way about that. I don't think our beach would be enhanced if some horrible accident and some pedestrian was injured there by a vehicle, commercial or otherwise. I think that somehow commercial capitalism usually finds a way, and somehow if the town in its wisdom decides to make Jeffrey's Way, which I would be in favor of, a basically non-vehicular street, during the height of the season when it is used by so much pedestrian traffic, and that needs to be done as safely as possible, then I think there will be some other way, if somebody has enough incentive, whether they strike a deal with the general store people or the real estate company people or the tides or someplace where, you know, either whether it be the kayak deliveries, which, you know, we haven't rented here, but we've rented from them elsewhere, and it's not a very, my understanding, watching what we had happen, it was not a quick drop-off. They were there for a substantial amount of time. It was a very unwieldy vehicle. Theirs was over at Cape Porpoise to back down and to drive out. Some level, minimal level of fitting people to their life jackets, and a lot of these people are people who have never kayaked before in their lives, and maybe giving them some minimal instruction. And it could be other commercial entities, a food truck or whatever. I think that I would hope that the selectmen would not be that opposed to keeping people as safe as possible there, and yet I'm sure there are other ways that commercialism can happen, or commercial vendors can still access the beach.
Getting a call from Africa here now.
Yeah, I got a phone number to stop that.
Barbara?
Barbara Barwise, Goose Rocks Beach. I cannot figure out why we are trying to accommodate the delivery of kayaks to the beach. I understand there's beach there, but I just don't understand it. We chase out the ice cream truck vendor. All we have to do is have one ding-a-ling, and everybody's on the phone. Get rid of him. We eliminated the windsurfer lady a few years ago from having her teaching the windsurfing lessons and having her windsurfers there. But all of a sudden, we're doing all of this for a residential beach that is a non-commercial use, and yet we're trying to provide the, well, I don't know how many, if there are two of them. They don't just deliver to Jeffrey's Way. They deliver to Edgewood, Proctor, each one of the places.
And the west end of the beach.
There
Get
you
into the
go.
west end every day.
And every day. So whoever calls, they're there and they deliver. To Catesport, it's not a quick delivery.
No, I understand it's not a quick delivery, and we're not trying to protect the commercial interest, but the commercial interest is there, and it serves people who visit the beach. So I agree with you, Barbara. The first thing that we should talk about is the safety issue, and it's not to promote the kayak vendors, but we know that they're going to be there, and we know they deliver to some houses, but a lot of the people, because they're a distance from the beach, or because they're not on the beach at all, they're seasonal people who have a parking permit, and they're going to be at the beach for one day and they want to have a kayak. So the vendors are going to be there no matter what, somehow or another. And certainly we don't want them on Kings Highway obstructing traffic. So, I mean, it is, you know, it's a sort of trying to balance. But I agree, the first issue and the reason it was initiated in the first place was the safety. So obviously we need to address that.
Richard?
So we're going to continue to chase out the ding-a-ling truck?
You know,
Safety issue.
Yeah, Richard?
not really.
Little kids running to an ice cream.
Well, you know,
We're doing that for years.
Carol?
Richard, as we consider this, do we need to consider also Binnacle Hill? The advertising for Binnacle Hill right now by the realtors talks about right away to tidal water access for launching SUPs, kayaks, and boats. And all lots are a short walk to Jeffrey's Way and public beach access. If you're already concerned about the volume of people, there are, 15 lots there, and I think whatever decision we make, I don't know what it is, That, I assume, is in your calculus somewhere.
Well, it's not 15, it's about 25 or
25, all
28
right.
or something like
Make
that.
it stronger in your calculus.
Yeah.
I suggest before you pick Dyke Road as an entrance, you spend one day at that intersection. It is beyond busy and out of control, with kids going back and forth from the store, people going to the store and parking. I don't have a solution to this problem, other than we are not a commercial beach. My only thought is they have to deliver before 7:30 in the morning.
Well, that is, we were talking about, one of the alternatives was restricting them to certain times of the day.
That's my only thought.
And, early morning and after, after 6 o'clock, something like that. But, you're still having them drive down and back up Jeffries Way.
Well, we may remove Jeffries Way.
Pardon me?
That's if we don't make Jeffries Way. It seems to me they're associated now, but I don't think they should be. Jeffries Way is a safety issue. And it really has nothing to do with the kayaks. The kayaks are just one of the other things that makes it a dangerous situation. We still have the problem of kayaks. Do we want them delivered? When do we want them delivered? Where do we want them delivered? That's a separate issue. But I think Jeffries Way can be solved and taken out of the kayak discussion simply by addressing the safety component, which I think would most logically be make it a residents-only street. Allow people, it's a pedestrian street during our 10-week high season. I would recommend, why complicate it? Leave the handicap spot there. It's no longer a safety issue, and now we've got another issue of kayaks, and what do we do about that? But kayaks just brought it to the forefront. It's really not the issue of Jeffries Way. Safety is the issue of Jeffries Way.
Laurie, do we know whether or not the town has the authority to make Jeffries Way a pedestrian-only, local traffic and pedestrian? I believe you talked to the town attorney, and making it local traffic only is one alternative. But when we say local traffic and a pedestrian way, because we certainly would like to have the drop-offs not.
It needs to say no drop-off. It
Yeah.
needs to state it clearly.
Well, the question,
No standing, no stopping, no drop-offs.
the question is whether the town has the authority to do it.
And where else can you say no drop-off? West End? Edgewood, where else, what? I mean, I'm not.
No, there's not I don't think that's anywhere near the same type of safety issue that we have at Jeffries Way. This is a
right
very
there at the West
unique
End, and there's a truck
stretch.
going back and
Could we
forth.
do one thing at a time? Lori, in terms of Jeffries Way,
Yes, the town could limit it to local traffic only. Of course, it is a right-of-way, so pedestrians are welcome. Local traffic has nothing to do with access for pedestrians.
well, there are no sidewalks. So is there authority to make a street something like a pedestrian mall? That
It
it's a
wouldn't be a
public
street
street, it's a
anymore.
public
I mean,
street.
because there are residences that access that, I mean,
You
we
can't
couldn't
put
just turn
barriers
it
up.
into
You
a
can't put
pedestrian.
barriers.
No, I understand that, but local traffic and pedestrians only. However it could be phrased. But that would hopefully eliminate the drop-offs. And that, the police would have an enforcement issue for a while, so people,
You'd have to have very clear signage, too, to make it very clear.
It will force the kayak people to go elsewhere, as long as we understand that.
Oh, that's right.
Where else can they go? We need to tell them that.
well,
If we
that's
can't,
the,
that's
that's
a
the
different discussion.
question, the debate is, do we tell them, or do they figure out for themselves? But-
I basically think entrepreneurs will figure out something. And if we address the public safety issue, which I think it's our responsibility to do, to make a recommendation, then I don't think it's our responsibility to find an alternative site for any commercial venture, and that most entrepreneurs are very capable of coming up with solutions to that. Once they're presented with, well, you can't go down this street, presumably they will find some other solution.
The question, though, is whether or not we move a safety problem from Jeffrey's Way to somewhere else.
I think
Carol
in our
Sherman raised-
conversations with Richard and Bob previous to this, we just wanted to make sure we weren't solving one problem and creating another.
Sure.
I mean, another thing we talked about is certainly everybody would just have to have the kayaks delivered at their property. But on the other hand, people from backlots bringing kayaks down to Kings Highway and dragging kayaks down the beach, you know, or down Kings Highway for some distance to get to a right-of-way, that would cause other issues. And so understanding where this customer base is and who's being impacted helps you understand what other problem you might, create. And I just don't know the answers to that.
Well, Carol raised the question about the intersection of Dyke Road and Kings Highway, and that is the potential, if they're able to drop off at the general store, then they have to cross that intersection to access the beach. And does that move the safety problem from Jeffrey's Way to that intersection?
Well,
My name is Mark Veillet. I'm from Kings Lane, and Jeffrey's Way happens to be our access point. This is definitely not my objective to move, to get our point not taken. But a few minutes ago, a suggestion was, I think from you, that we could substitute one
Could
of...
you use the microphone, please?
We could substitute one of the 173 parking space, so remove one from near Edgewood and put one further down on another location. Could we just actually do more than this and remove 2 or 3 of those and move them at other locations, and have a 10-minute stop where even long trailers can come, deliver, drop whatever they have to do, and it could also apply to families, people who have the people who are currently backing up, and which we are going to prevent from doing now if that town ordinance comes that we cannot have in the summertime any traffic but local traffic. Those people will still want to maybe move with all their gear. If we had somewhere along, in proximity maybe of Edgewood, a 5-minute stop, 10-minute stop, families would be able to drop there, have one of the parents go with the children, and somebody move elsewhere.
Well, we talked about the last 2 spaces on Kings Highway before New Biddeford Road, just before Jeffrey's Way. The problem is that the 2 spaces are probably not enough to pull in a pickup truck, a trailer, and actually offload a kayak, because they have to have a lot of space beyond the trailer. The other issue is there is nowhere where we can find 3 spaces. Three parking spaces the 173 parking spaces, it was a torture getting to that number. There are literally no other areas where we could have public parking. I mean, most of the side streets are fire lanes, and in terms of Dyke Road and New Biddeford Road, you run into issues of the marsh, and now that you have Binnacle Hill there in their driveway, there isn't much space that where you can move another parking space. And I got to tell you, those of us who are not on the beach, during the season we are blessed with people who don't care where they park, and they'll park on our property, they'll park on streets that are labeled fire lanes. But it's not an easy problem. We're trying to put a square peg in a round hole.
And I agree with you, but three parking spots won't make a difference as far as this is concerned. A few minutes ago, we were talking about anyway moving at least one in order to move away a handicapped place, which in my opinion is
One.
Okay.
But
And maybe a compromise could be that instead of having 173, we're going to go back to 172 because two of the others are going to be converted to a place where people can drop off, which corresponds to actually, a similar usage, albeit not parking.
Jeffrey's Way, though.
by ordinance, we cannot reduce the number of parking spaces.
Could we
I
convert-
think
can we
that
convert?
this law has been made by human. It can be also changed by human. And again, if we want to start picking battles, I know for having the pulse a little bit of the beach that some people who signed the agreements are not so pleased about the way it's being handled.
That may be so, but we have an agreement that is beachfront property owners, backlot owners involved in litigation, and then an ordinance on top of that.
So you're telling me that 173 will never be changed?
I can't tell you it will never be changed. I'm just telling you it is a hike up a very steep mountain with ice on the trail. Okay.
But just to put some
Rob.
crampons here just for a minute on that trail. If I understood the gentleman, his concern was not about kayaks, but rather about families that would use Jeffrey's Way as a drop-off. And I think it could make some sense. I don't know if you're reducing, but if you took two or three parking places, there's still the number of parking places, but you combine them into a 10-minute drop-off zone. That could go a long way to alleviate what you're going to remove with Jeffrey's Way if we make it pedestrian or pedestrian only.
Just so I understand, if we were to create, let's say, 3 spaces for a drop-off zone,
Yeah.
10-minute limits,
Right.
what are we going to drop off? Kayaks?
No. Well, if they can do it in 10 minutes, they can get it out, good for them.
No,
But
but I
we're
mean,
not going to do it in 10 minutes.
No, that's my point. And so, I mean, this issue started because we were going to figure out a way to try and get people to use kayaks, which, as Barbara
Well,
pointed out,
kayak-
is which is a commercial use of basically a beach property. And I'm saying maybe we're turning ourselves upside down to try and do something that we really should be trying to do. You know, maybe kayaks ought to be rentable over at Colony Beach, or
Right.
maybe at Cape Porpoise or someplace else.
And indeed they are.
Not at Goose Rocks.
Well, and that's a good solution
I'm
perhaps
just
as well.
suggesting it maybe where we ought to be going.
I believe what I was talking about has nothing to do with kayaks.
Okay.
What I'm trying to do is to replace the family drop-off element that I think was very important of Jeffrey's Way, where a family with a large SUV wants to come in, unload the cooler, unload the tent, unload the piece they're going to use. Part of the family goes down. It's a small tent, and the other person goes to park.
Where are they, they're going to park that car?
Well, they've got to park that car somewhere. They're only there 10 minutes. I've seen a lot of people do it,
A
though.
lot of people do it too.
That's what they do at Jeffrey's Way. That's what I have seen, the use of Jeffrey's Way for drop-off.
Interesting. I have not, I mean, I actually can't speak to that, because I haven't.
Well, you need to see,
Well,
I,
down at the west end, just so we're clear.
That's right.
But our vision is the 5 or 4, five spaces down there?
no,
Well-
it's
But
used a
that's
lot.
quite different,
It's used a lot.
John,
And
I
that's part
agree.
of
I
the
don't
danger.
think it's not everybody uses Jeffrey's Way. Many people will use any of the entrances. I mean, I personally have done that where we've driven a car down to unload all the stuff at the Proctor entrance.
Right.
And then somebody drives the car home and the rest of us happily go out on the beach. So I think there is that happening, that activity, the drop off, the pickup, at almost all of the entrances to the beach.
Doing it at the open spot.
They're doing it
that-
at the open spot there, sort of right in front, and usually people do it as quickly as they can.
And it's enough, you
they're
think?
only there for
No,
5
it's fair.
minutes of that, depending on how long it takes you to corral all the kids and get them in the
Yeah.
car. So I think that either it already exists elsewhere, or people can stop literally at the entrance to or will stop at the entrance to Jeffries Way, which is now not going to be having cars turning in and out except very occasionally for the residents. So, I mean, I think people will create their own additional a new drop-off spot that might not be as much of a pedestrian safety issue as when they drive down Jeffries Way to get them closer to the beach. And I do somewhat agree that I think that the kayak issue, again, I'm not sure we need to decide the issue. We need to help them solve the problem. I think that if people want to be able to conduct a kayak business at the beach, they will find a way, whether they make some arrangement with the general store. Maybe that's where the general store allows them to leave certain number of kayaks there on racks or something in the back part of there. I'm just saying, people who want to make a commercial venture successful often have, you know, innovative ways of doing it or linking up with other people who are also in commercial ventures.
And then we may need to react to whatever they decide, but
True,
that's what we'll need to do.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but
and
we-
I think one of the things we need to be careful about would be if, in those solutions, do we create other problems, safety-wise,
Right.
in other parts of the beach?
And that's,
Then
and
we
that's,
react to them. I mean,
and that's
all
the
we can
reason
do.
for,
Yeah.
for talking about the kayaks, is that we don't want to transfer a problem that's in Jeffries Way to somewhere else.
But it's hard to conceive of what that might be. We can make, you know, you can create
But in
ghosts
terms,
all over
in
the
terms of
place.
the drop-off, you know, we do have striped spaces.
Case points well taken, I remember those, and so I know, there really are other drop-off places, you don't feel they're sufficient, but,
I don't know, I was suggesting 3 because of the length of those rigs in particular.
Right.
so you were thinking kayaks then, I misunderstood.
Well, no, I was thinking that it could be used by anyone.
Fair enough.
In the limits of 5-10 minutes, and including, by making them longer, that would enable a commercial drop-off.
My concern candidly is, what's gonna bring in is a busload of people, 15 kids, 20 kids at a time.
No, those are limited in
Yeah.
terms of the
Sir, if you're
buses.
going to talk, would you go into the microphone, please?
Could I
Bill?
make
Thanks,
one,
Mike.
I'm finding it interesting that nobody has said anything about contacting the kayak folks to see if they might have an alternative way in which to deliver the kayaks to the beach that might accommodate our concerns.
Bill, we did that in the beginning.
Those discussions have been had.
heard it tonight, nobody's mentioned it.
No, nobody's mentioned it, but there was a meeting with Chief of Police, the town manager, Bob Sherman, and me, and one of the major kayak company.
Here is an attempt to answer the argument that possibly by having such a long drop-off area, it would enable buses. But actually, buses are themselves forbidden. I believe that the beach agreement
Not more than
allows
15.
buses of no more than a certain
15.
number.
All right.
And right now, if somebody wanted to drop 15, they can also double park. Usually, it's faster almost to drop people than to do that.
Is there a general consensus among the members in terms of exploring a local traffic pedestrian way for Jeffries?
Yes.
What is local traffic?
The
Residential
The residents,
Homeowners.
UPS, FedEx, the post office, but just,
And the handicap spot.
well, let's
Let's put that aside.
let's do one at a time. One at a time. It's
Well,
not,
if one's going to exclude the other, they've got to be taken together.
one doesn't exclude the other.
Well, then it includes the handicap
No.
spot, then I'm with
Well,
you.
let's initially decide, have the town manager see whether or not the town attorney would agree that we could limit it to pedestrians and residents only.
The town attorney has said we could.
And we could prevent drop-offs?
Prevent driving down the street for drop-offs, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
And to be clear, if you did this, space or spaces for pedestrian and residents-only drop-offs, are we thinking about this on Jeffrey's Way, and is that what we're thinking about designated in Jeffrey's Way?
Well,
Yes.
We're
Or-
not talking about spaces for drop-off anymore,
Okay.
are we?
Well,
No.
No, not on Jeffrey's
No,
Way.
I'm sorry,
No,
okay,
that got, I think, taken.
okay.
Yeah, yeah.
All right. Can,
This is just to make Jeffrey's.
can we defer the issue of the handicap space and ask whether the chief of police has an opinion on that? The premise, the initial premise would be that it would be a pedestrian way, local traffic only. Does he have an issue with leaving the handicap space there?
I think that's a legitimate question.
Lori, you ask the chief. Well, I understand. We put it on just for discussion purposes. So would it upset you if we did a vote? Let's see where we are. Could someone propose a motion, see whether we have a second, and see where we are on it?
So you.
All right, I'll put a
Okay,
motion out
here's
there.
What the lawyer can do, come on, come on.
Thanks a lot.
Lawyer.
I move that we recommend that Jeffrey's Way be made a access only to to residents. No stopping, no standing, no parking.
No drop-off, pedestrian traffic.
Yeah. No stopping, no standing, no parking means, except for the residents who presumably, this is a little bit more than needs to be in the motion, excuse me. I move that it be made a street with no stopping, no standing, no parking, and access only to the residents, vehicular traffic access only to the residents on that street.
Is there a second? Is
I'm not
there a
going there
second
yet.
before we have
Yeah.
any discussion?
I'll second that, just
Okay.
for purposes of
Any
discussion.
discussion on the motion?
I would like to add a sentence that would assess the impact on the handicap spot if that were done. I think if we say no parking, I think that's going to pretty well eliminate the possibility unless an exclusion can be made.
What about a second motion asking the chief of police to give us a recommendation as to the handicap parking space, assuming that it was going to be local traffic only?
Okay. Let me amend my motion by saying that Jeffrey's Way become a street on which no stopping, no standing, no parking with the possible exception of a handicap space after consultation with the chief of police. And vehicular access only for residents of that street. Is that?
Jim, do you accept the
Yeah,
remarks?
yeah, I accept it.
I
John,
guess
does that satisfy?
as long as UPS deliveries, et cetera, let's not put ourselves in a box, but I think, yeah, that does, yeah.
Yeah, but how many spaces do we have, parking spaces on Jeffrey's Way now?
Only
Just
one handicap.
one handicap.
Only one handicap?
it's
And there
handicap.
are no other parking
No.
spaces?
There
in the
aren't now, it's
No,
just a
170?
there's no
handicap.
legal parking
For sure,
spaces.
no legal. Okay, I was just gonna verify that to be correct, but,
I
okay.
drove down there 2 days ago.
Well,
It's the only one is the handicap space, that's the only one there? Okay.
Carol, do you have a question or a comment?
I wanted to assess how it would affect the rest of the beach by not having drop-off. on
Carol.
Jefferson.
I think we need to assess how not having people being able to be dropped off at Jeffrey's Way will affect the rest of the beach. on Kings Highway, Dyke Road, where they drop people off all the time, West End, where they drop people off. I think there will be an effect on the rest of the beach.
Carol,
Well-
there are areas, Proctor, Edgewood, all of the access points, there are striped areas.
That allow for drop-off there?
No, they don't allow parking, but they do not prohibit drop-offs.
Okay.
And there could be a striped area at the entrance to Jeffrey's Way, be my suggestion. So people could pull in there to drop off.
Well, you've got 2 parking spaces right there, John,
No, across the road itself.
on the.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. That's, I mean, my feeling is
point,
that
people
people
can-
will probably
Oh, okay.
create a drop-off area, and whether we want to then make it sort of an official as the other, a stripe across that whole entrance to the street.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I'm,
I don't know legally or whatever.
Yeah.
well, it's something we may,
In Jeffrey's Way.
In the way, that would say, right, in Jeffrey's Way.
Well, not
we
if I'm
might want
parked
to
on,
consider
in the
whether,
intersection.
John, you might want to consider whether having drop-offs on the actual entrance to Jeffrey's Way has its own problem in terms of pedestrian traffic.
Indeed it might, so.
So we have a motion and it is seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Any noes? Any abstentions?
There were 5 yeses.
There are 5 yeses.
We'll float this idea. I mean, the worst thing you can do is say you can't do it or something else, but I think we give it our best shot. Let's see. See
Okay.
if we can't simplify this.
And I hope we get a response. If the answer is no, there'd be a reasoned response, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Well, when it is before the selectmen, one or more of us will probably be asked to defend the motion at the selectmen's meeting.
Okay.
All right. Any other new business?
So just to be clear, did we solve the kayak issue? Is that-
No,
No.
Is that
no,
coming up,
we-
or is that going to be
we-
delayed
we
or thought about?
we punted it to the next meeting.
Well, we've certainly complicated it, which is, I think, by
Yes.
this, it's
Yeah.
going to
Yeah.
aggravate
Okay.
the situation.
So we're going to seek solutions between now and the next meeting and see if there's, the
Well-
solution may be, we say it's a commercialization of the beach and that's not what we wanted to do. That's another alternative.
Well, the
is
sort of the
all-
sense of a couple of our members is that the vendors will find their own way of, and places to deliver. Our problem will be whether or not they create additional issues.
Right.
If they, they block Kings Highway, offloading kayaks, then we know that that's a problem, and the police know how to deal with that.
Maybe a no commercial kayak zone, I don't know.
Well, but it's possible.
Okay.
It's possible.
Next meeting. January, February.
January.
and-
It's too much fun to pass off.
Pardon me?
It's too much fun, we gotta do it in January.
Yeah, I think we
Okay.
should do it in
End
January.
of January?
That's fine, I think we should do it in January,
Yeah.
considering that I think we've got this issue, that's still,
agree.
there's parts of this that are still not resolved, and if we want to make recommendations to the selectmen on either of the other parts of it, we need to have time to discuss it, in order to
Yeah,
give them time to consider whatever we recommend before
It's
we're
almost a
into the next
concern,
season.
because they're so tightly related, I would think the selectmen would wanna have some idea of where we're going with the kayak issue before they would even consider this one, would be my thought. So we made a motion, I don't know really what the next step is. Does that go to the selectmen without further discussion on kayaks? I think that'd be a mistake.
Well, I think that is a decision of the town manager as to whether or not it will go to the selectmen. I suspect it will go at least for discussion purposes.
Okay.
Lori, could you have Arlene please give us some dates, the end of January, very early February, that this facility is available for us.
There's one Monday holiday in January, Martin Luther King Day
Oh,
is the
that's right.
21st.
Yeah, that takes out
Just
a
so you
Monday.
know.
Well, we don't necessarily have to have it on a Monday.
Oh, okay.
I mean, it's been Mondays to accommodate one member.
Okay.
And this meeting was scheduled to accommodate that one member, and
You get a better opportunity.
and she had an opportunity to go to London, so she thought that was better than
I don't
being
blame
here.
her.
And I don't blame her.
Sounds
I
like
heard there was a parking place for kayak unloading there.
But, okay,
catch up with you.
so I'll circulate the dates once I get them from Arlene. Open the meeting to the public. Any other comments, questions?
Richard, when I was in business, this was a great week when it was Thanksgiving, and we took time just to thank people who really worked for us and our businesses to help build them and make them happen. And I know there are people out here, Barbara, you know, you're steadfast in helping us and do this stuff. The people on this board, Lori, you've done a heck of a job of just balancing all these things for us and guiding it out. And I just want to say thank you, because this is the season, and I'm deeply personally appreciative for
And
the
Carol.
effort that we're trying to do to make Goose Rocks Beach the best beach in Maine. I think it's superb. I love what we're doing on water. We've made great progress on dogs and people. We're gaining on it. So let's stay steadfast, but thank you for your time. I just had to say that.
Amen, Bob,
Yay.
thank you.
Motion to adjourn?
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Done.
Aye.